do to kick off this new year? What goals do we have? What health resolutions or just, in simple, what kind of habits do you want to implement this year? That's going to be the topic of discussion today as we mastermind, and I'll obviously share my own experiences, but my goal with all of this is always how do we make it a lifestyle, right? Sometimes it's good to do these challenges. Like, for example, my wife did a 75 hard challenge for a period of time, and it entails two workouts, a 45-minute workout indoors, a 45-minute workout outdoors. If you're really truly doing the 75 hard, you're doing 10 pages of nonfiction reading. I think you're drinking a certain amount of water, maybe a gallon, which is probably not too healthy anyways. Um, is there anything I'm missing? Anyways, it's not setting yourself up for, let's just say you don't want to do that every day. I think it's a great starting point for some people to kind of get the ball moving, but we need to create a lifestyle that actually you love, that you want to do every single day, and then you naturally get healthy from. That makes sense? So for me, my kind of my kickoff for this year is I want to start one. I've been doing the X3 bar for a long time, for a couple years now. Um, but for me, I wanted to encourage my wife to get on board. And so she's been doing this fun little program with her girls. And, you know, I'm like, all right, when are you going to join me on this one? Because this is going to be a game changer for you, I promise. And so we're 4 days in, and it's really funny. You can follow us actually our journey if it's the videos are in the group if you want to see how we interact together. But that's my goal is to work out with her. And then I've got 4 kids. So Austin's 10, Elijah 8 years old, Jackson 5, Lily Grace 4. So we're trying to get the family involved. So what we've been doing recently is walks together as a family. And in that goal that I have, which is naturally getting everybody involved, it's been quite fun and entertaining, is 10,000 steps a day. Now, the last thing I'll add on to that, I personally have been doing the carnivore diet for a long time. Um, I'm not like a carnivore like police where I'm like, you only got to do meat and water. No, that's not the way I work. Um, but I have lived a carnivore lifestyle for at least 5 years and a low carb lifestyle for a couple of decades. Um, and so for me, I'm kicking off the month just because I know myself and you gotta ultimately know you, is I'm doing carnivore, but for the month of January, I'm going to remove dairy other than butter. Just because dairy becomes such a crutch for me. I love it. I throw it in everything. I'll put heavy whipping cream in my coffee, but then all of a sudden it becomes like 3 coffees with heavy whipping cream. And then all of a sudden I throw cheese on everything because cheese is so delicious. And then all of a sudden I'm eating full fat yogurt. And then before you know it, I'm just like demolishing a bunch of dairy. And I feel like it's not even a weight thing for me as much as it's an inflammation thing. And so what I'm trying to focus for as I get older, I'm 42 years old, is um, mental clarity is going to be my key, energy, and the least amount of inflammation as possible. So the things I used to do because I was a collegiate football player, and then I actually got into my later days in my 20s as I was competing as a CrossFit athlete. And so I used to do some pretty crazy stuff. And now at 42, I'm working out smarter, not harder, right? And that's the advantage of the X3 bar. You literally minimize risk of injury, um, if at all, right? Like it's really hard to get hurt with using a band if you're doing it properly, if your form's good. Even in the negative, right? If you think about this, that partial, this is where most people are most susceptible to injury. So with the X3 bar or variable resistance band training, you get to maximize on everything with, in some cases, 10 minutes of working out, full failure. If you're doing the original program, you're basically just doing push exercises and 4 pull exercises alternating days, right? I mean, there's a lot of variations that have come out of it, the hypertrophy program. There's different coaches in the X3 community. Dr. John has been speaking about a specific program he's personally testing right now that is through Westside Barbell. If you're familiar with Westside Barbell, they're out of Ohio. They've produced more Olympian powerlifters than anywhere in the world. And they're now actually going to adapt the X3 bar. So I personally, my goal is obviously just to make it a lifestyle, and I'm doing it with my wife. So what I've been kind of doing is I'm like, hey, I'm going to do the push-pull thing with you, but I'm going to alternate days. So for example, I'm going to go super light one day on the push and the pull, kind of use it as a recovery day, but more of a mind-body connection where I'm going extremely slow in the eccentric movement, pausing in the ISO, and then just as slow up. So the one rep that I'm doing becomes a lot longer rep, if that makes sense. But I'm keeping the time under tension as high as possible. Does that make sense? And on the alternate day, I'm going to go into a power. So instead of like, for example, on the push, I'll go take the elite band, which is the orange band, and I'll freaking try to jack as many of those as I possibly can in a strength movement that's more geared towards like how many can I get? I'm not going to focus on so much of time under tension as how strong am I? And I'll alternate between those. Go ahead, Gary. I know you had something you wanted to add.
So, question: you just mentioned um, the push to pull, the way that the X3 program was developed, but the other day, you gave a different. I'm trying to find it on my notes here. Like Monday, you did chest, and then the next day you did Monday you did chest and pec. Tuesday you did back and calves. Wednesday was quads. Thursday was shoulders. You get
Yep.
the idea. So
Yep.
it was one concentrated exercise a day. So have you found that to be good enough, or are you back to the four on alternating days?
I found that to be phenomenal for me. You got to know yourself. So ultimately, I'm somebody who if it were up to me, I'd train every day. It'd be really hard because I'm an all or nothing guy to get me to rest. I have to force myself to rest. So ultimately, you have to know you, and how often you want to train. What I'm doing now is I'm going back to the original programming because this is more about supporting my wife. And so I just want to get her to understand the foundation and the basics, and it's basically going back to the beginning. Now, Coach Johan is the coach out of Sweden that I personally work with. And so he wrote that program for me. So the program you're talking about with chest day one, back and calves two, quads, shoulders, arms, lower back. Well, it's more than you can think, because really what he does is I do 2 sets, for example, of a chest press in that program. Both are max efforts. They're at least 40-second time under tension. And then I'm doing something like a superhero band cross. So, like a crossover.
Mhm.
Again, I'm doing 2 of those sets for max. And then after that's all done, I go back to another chest press, but I'm doing 3 exercises, basically 3 chest presses in a row, dropping the band way down and really focusing on a super light tension where I'm going at least 20 reps on those on each set, resting 30 seconds between those sets to finish the metabolic stress or pump, if that makes sense. So, and then there's some stretching involved. So that it's a lot more than just, hey, I'm doing chest today, right? Because if you do that properly, I mean that workout should essentially take you 20 minutes.
Mhm.
But that would be all you would kind of focus on to hit the chest for the week. So he's got other programs that I've done. He's done programs, and you can kind of, this is where you do them in block sequences. Like maybe you're going to be doing them for 3 months, 90 days, and you'll alternate. And so the other programs he's had me done or do would be like there's a Man of Steel program that he's developed. It's a push day one, pull day two, legs day three, and then you go back to push, pull legs. And then there's another one, it's called Man of Steel Muscle Mass. So it's obviously focusing on a muscle mass, similar structure, but different rep sequence. He's got another one that's called the Hulk. So, I mean, this guy lives, eat, and breathes this. That's what he does for a living. And so he's always experimenting first through himself. And if you've seen Coach Johan's physique, you're going to say, well, the evidence is there, right? So, and what I like about him is he's not a dogmatic, like, hey, I'm only going to tell you to do one way, right? I think ultimately we all got to realize that variable band or variable resistance training works. We know that. We can all agree on that. Now, I think you have to kind of open up your mind a little bit is there's going to be people in there like, no one should do anything but the original program. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, you're feel free that. Just like there's going to be people out there say, like, if you drink coffee with carnivore, uh, you're banned, right? What's the truth? The truth is in the results. So if you show me your physique and you're getting stronger and you're getting leaner, that's what matters. And are you doing it with joy? Like, is it something you're finding actually you're getting results with? So that's me. Like that's what I would say is the most important piece. Any questions on that?
Not for me.
Joe, Travis, great to have you guys. If you're listening, feel free to unmute yourself. Today, it's really just more about kind of coming together, guys. It's a small, intimate, obviously gathering. So, um, it's New Year's, like it's day one. I know it's a reset, and my wife would be coming on here if she was right now. She'd be like, actually, Marcus, we're following a Gregorian calendar. If we actually studied the different calendars, it would be March, where or the beginning of spring would be day one of the year. But here we are. And this is a time where a lot of people reflect and they set goals, make resolutions. All the gyms fill up first 30 days, and then 90% of them fall out. So for me, I like it because it's World Carnivore Month. As a carnivore, it's a great way to educate people and say, hey, why don't you take a 30-day challenge, take out the plants, see how you feel, right? Um, I like Dr. Ken Berry. I've posted some videos in the group. I think Dr. Ken Berry has a very easy way of communicating things that people can understand. I think one of the easiest ways to start carnivore, if you've never done it before, is beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. Now, obviously, you can do all carnivore foods, but I find ruminant meat is the best. So if you can find any ruminant meat, and don't overthink these things like, oh, do I need to do grass fed, grass finished? Of course, if you have a budget, that's obviously the best choice. But you're just by getting ground beef, even commercially raised ground beef, you're not 100 times healthier than most people with the food choices. So I always say, like, just shop within your budget, right? Obviously, raw, like at the end of the day, everybody wants to go grass fed, free range, organic, local, seasonal, da 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 da, right? We all, everybody's like in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world. So we make choices to the best we can based on what's available to us. I got 4 kids to feed. I hit Costco, right? And I buy in bulk when possible. Obviously, the best way to go if you think you're going to create a lifestyle out of this is to go find a side and put it in your freezer. Get a deep freezer and have that as your priority. Eggs for me, personally, I eat at least a half a dozen, if not a dozen eggs a day. Superfood. Like for example, I'm not a big eater during the morning and day, but what I do love, I enjoy coffee, right? Now, this is my Superman cup. I talked about my Superman coffee. What do I put in it? I throw in a scoop of collagen, electrolyte mix that I made, and I can share it with you guys. You can DM me on Facebook, but it's basically a combination of Redmond sea salt, a little potassium and magnesium. And you buy this in bulk one time, you put it in a jar, it'll last you for the year because you're taking just a teaspoon, even less, half a teaspoon in some cases. And I'll just throw that to feed my electrolytes. Now, there's this very controversial argument about sodium, salt. Go by taste and go by feel. Ultimately, if you're removing carbohydrates from your diet, I think it's a really great thing to do in the beginning is to salt liberally to taste. And then something like this electrolyte, especially if you're training, because you don't want to cramp up. I think that's one of the biggest things people make mistakes for when they start a carnivore life. Um, and then you just got to make it enjoyable, right? So at the end of the day, I'll also broth, like beef broth is a big thing for me. I feel like it's a superfood because of the gelatin, the collagen, all the vitamins and minerals that are occurring in the marrow and the bone. And so what I'll do is I'll roast a pound or two of bones in the oven at 400 for about 30 minutes. So they get that nice brown. Throw them in a slow cooker. I have a water source called Kangen. If you ever heard of Kangen water, it's hydrogenated ionized water. It's essentially I throw that in the slow cooker with those bones. Um, Put it on low. 12 to 24 hours later, you know, there's your broth. What I do is I actually turn it off, put it in the fridge. All the fat rises to the top of that broth. I scoop that broth off. I'll put it in a side in a jar because you can use that tallow later. And then I'll just scoop it out of the fridge. It's almost like gelatinous in nature in the fridge. And then I'll just throw it in the pot and I'll drink that during the day. Oftentimes, just like the coffee, because so when I go back to that coffee, I'll throw a raw egg yolk, collagen, electrolyte powder, and butter. So I'm not fasting, but what I would say is I'm very much staying on that type of coffee slash broth AM schedule into my early afternoon. And the reason why I do that because I feel like it gives me extreme mental clarity. And it's easy to do because I personally I'm standing at a desk right now. Um, I do full-time marketing and sales for Primal Medical. And so most of what I do is this right here, talking and communicating through Zoom or Google Meet or meetings similar to this, right? And so there's not a lot of work for me. I don't need a lot of energy to exert. So for me, the most important takeaway of my day is how can I maximize my energy and mental clarity? So any food that I eat, I don't want anything to go in my system that would make me tired or deplete energy from me. Does that make sense? So I've found this work to parallel, and I've talked about this in previous masterminds. If you can understand that you have two nervous systems, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. Are you guys familiar with that? You ever heard of that? Those two? One is fight or flight, the other rest and relaxation. So Ori Hofmeckler, who's kind of one of the OGs in the intermittent fasting world, if you ever studied his understanding around this, is that if you follow those circadian rhythms, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, the fight or flight, and the rest relaxation, and you find out what foods to eat inside of those windows, you can maximize your energy. I find the least amount of food, the faster assimilating foods you can keep in your body during the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, the more energy you have throughout the day. Does that make sense, practically speaking? So, meaning I'm not going to do bacon and eggs first thing I wake up with. Now, you can try it, do it, see how you feel. That might give you energy. For me, going into trying to digest a bunch of meat doesn't work. Now, on the contrast, drinking a coffee blended with those ingredients that I told you, or drinking bone broth, it gives me energy. I'm not digesting much of anything. And I'm giving myself just as much energy as I need through the combination of all that fantastic nutrition that's going straight to my brain. Make sense? So I've got to create a lifestyle out of this. You got to test it. I tell everybody, don't take it from me. I am my own experiment. You have to be your own experiment. There's no one size fits all for everybody. You can take what you learn from people and try it yourself. That's why if you've never done carnivore diet before, do a 30-day, even better 90-day experiment. Give it a shot. See, because there's going to be natural things happening in your body that you need to be prepared for if you've been eating carbohydrates for a long time. Your body is shifting from glucose to ketones. So you might go through this transition where you're feeling almost like a keto flu experience until you learn how to become fat adaptive. Does that make sense? So I've been there a long time, and I don't mess around. Like I'm not a I laugh with my wife a bunch because cheating is not worth it to me. You can cheat all you want, but you're just cheating yourself, right? So when I watch The Rock, because I think I'm very fascinated by The Rock, right? Dwayne Johnson and his workouts. And you ever watched his videos and the cheat videos that he has? I'm like, you are not natural. Let's be honest. I, Anyone who thinks he's not on something, like no one's got a physique like that, right? In his 50s, just by lifting weights. So, that being said, he glorifies the cheat meal, but I'm like, I'd rather just feel good. I don't need to get like I work with Coach Johan too. I understand how some people, and I think there's a guy, Kevin, in the group that is a trainer that utilizes carbs. He's a natural bodybuilder. But for me, you know what? I don't like those cravings that come with carbs, where you all of a sudden like it opens up a window and you want to eat all the time because you're doing really it's if you think about the science, it's creating it's all around insulin. So if you start understanding why you feel the way you feel when you get hungry and you understand those pain or hunger signals, now it just completely makes sense when you remove carbs, it satiates you, you stay full longer, you're not thinking of food all the time. Does that make sense? Ultimately, you would have to experiment and experience that for yourself to understand the difference. Because if you've never experienced what it feels like to be in a ketone or a ketogenic style of approach to your nutrition, the advantage too for guys who are trying to get as lean as possible, when you go into a keto state, you're burning through your own body's fat. That's ultimately what you want. So if you are using carbs, you have to burn through that first. But when you go into a ketogenic, less than 20 grams of carbs therapeutic style of phase, which obviously carnivore is basically removing carbs other than what naturally occurs in any meat at a very small portion, your body becomes ketogenic. Watch your weight drop. Watch inflammation leave your body. Watch all of a sudden you get this mental clarity that you've never experienced before, this energy that comes out of nowhere. Watch your natural testosterone production as a man increase. All these things, these levers that you get to pull. Nutrition is a big lever. Hormones is a big lever. Fitness is a big lever. So if you're trying to optimize your health in 2025, in my mind, you're going to an ancestrally appropriate nutrition diet. You're leveraging the X3 bar because there's nothing like it in terms of burning fat and increasing lean muscle mass. And really, you're optimizing your hormones. Pull on all those three, you got a life transformation. So that's kind of where I'm at. And so I do what works for me. And so I drink when thirsty, but coffee is my one vice. I drink it organically. But what I'll tell you is like some people have to pull it out if that is an issue for them. For me, I kind of look at it as medicinal. So I think plants have a purpose. I think they're medicinal on purpose. But I think most plants don't want you to eat them. And based on the research that I've found, the plants that do want you to eat them reproduce after themselves with seeds. That's where you get guys like Dr. Paul Saladino talk about fruit, right? Now, but most fruit has been changed. And over the course of hundreds of years and GMO and all this stuff, like it's not the same as it was with our grandparents. So again, if you're going to eat that, also consider that what could you actually eat right now in season in the winter that's local to you? Where is all this fruit coming from in abundance all over the world? That's not natural, right? So I always say if you're going to touch any of that, like what's the lowest glycemic option as possible? And then there's a whole nother talk about oxalates and how those are not good for you, and those are all coming in plants. So from my basic understanding, I'm not by any means go do your research. I do my own when I listen to guys like Dr. Anthony Chaffee. He's a great one to look into if you haven't um, researched carnivore. Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Sean Baker, obviously Dr. John Jaquish, right, of Jaquish Biomedical and X3, and these are all carnivore doctors. So experiment with it for yourself. Now, Joe, how's it going, buddy? How's those walks going in the morning? I know that was a big part of your journey based on what we talked about last time.
No, staying consistent with those, and obviously the start of the new year, going to start seriously with the X3 program, and I'm considering doing the 90-day carnivore, introducing the electrolytes. I listened to the YouTube you put out there with Dr. Ken Berry, which is very informational, and I mean also very inspiring. I think it just gives you a lot of good information and how to execute and what things to consider, supplements, organ meats. I mean, it's just a ton of information. So I'm going to listen to it again and really try to commit to it.
There's a lot of arguments around to consume organ meats or not. And there's just as much evidence to suggest that you don't need them as there is to suggest you do, right? So you're going to get two crowds. I've found, based on my observations and studies, that there are people that have been on the carnivore for decades. There's this one family called the Anderson family, and they just eat ribeyes. And whenever they reintroduced organs, they just didn't feel the same. Like, I don't know if it's vitamin A toxic overload or what it is. So you ultimately got to actually experiment for yourself. I don't think there's any harm with having a little beef liver. That'd probably be the only organ that I would consume. I don't think there's an actual harm with taking something like cod liver oil, for the natural form of vitamin A and D. Uh, um, in terms of supplementation, I don't really mess around with supplementation outside of I've experimented a little bit with creatine, and I think ultimately creatine is something that, based on what I've researched, is probably more of a benefit for the brain in cognitive function than it is actually for what it's kind of been used in sports for. That's what at least I'm picking up on a lot of people using it now. But I feel like if you're predominantly eating a red meat, you're going to have enough creatine that comes natural in it. Electrolytes, I think, is something that everybody can benefit from. Now, I don't like the packets that have a bunch of crap in them. And so for me, just make your own if you're going to try that. Again, some people would say yes or no to that based on you got to do your own studies. So there's no one person that's going to tell you got to experiment with it for yourself. Try it without it. Also, I know there's carnivores. There's like the big controversy of do we need salt or do we not need salt? Personally, I like salt. Personally. One argument will be, what about spices? Right? So I've done only salt. Other people throw pepper, black pepper and garlic on their food. Those are plants, right? Now, I think ultimately you just got to experiment because sometimes it's good if you're going carnivore to eliminate in the beginning and then add in after 30 days and see how you feel. Ultimately, when you hear cases like Dr. Jordan Peterson, Michaela Peterson, and some of these people you've heard about the lion diet, which is just red meat and water. Well, the reason why they've gone that route because everything else hasn't worked. And so they literally had to go ruminant and water to figure out what was happening in their body. They had a lot of people who have autoimmune issues and even mental disorders and or bipolar and all these different things that can naturally come up. That's what they've done and it's worked for them. And then they've tried adding in other things and it worked. But for a lot of us, we just come in because we want to just optimize our health, maybe lose weight and feel good, right? So there's no one size fits all, but in general, it's great to always approach something in an elimination style and then add back in. So for example, over the winter, over December, I consumed a lot of dairy and not grass-fed raw dairy. I was drinking, we had my mother-in-law came in. Whenever she comes, she just rocks the house world with all the stuff that shouldn't be in the fridge because she's spoiling her grandchildren, right? And part of the way she loves them is to give them everything they shouldn't have. Now, when that happens, she loves her coffee and she's going and she's buying all the half and halves and all the heavy whipping cream, but she's buying it from the store at Costco. And there's something inside this heavy whipping cream called carrageenan, which is a binder. And carrageenan is actually made, I believe, from red seaweed, but there's a lot of studies that show issues in your gut and inflammation from it. And that's obviously probably what when you go get a Starbucks and even if you ask for some heavy cream in it, there's a couple of those preservatives or additives in there, right? Outside of cream itself. In a perfect world, we have, which is what it should be, cream itself, raw cream. But when you start adding these things, your body doesn't register with them. And so you start feeling a little aches, inflammation, not natural. And I feel these things a little bit more than probably most because most people can't distinguish what they're feeling because they have so many foods that are not meant to be in their body. The standard American diet obviously is one where it has wreaked havoc on our health. I mean, you're seeing a global pandemic of issues that you've never seen before. And that has to do with how gluten has changed with the genetic modification of it. That has to do with what's been sprayed on our foods. It has to do with all these artificial processed foods that you're seeing in the store that weren't there 20, 30 years ago. Those wouldn't be there. And then you go back in 50 years and you think about in the 50s and the 60s, you remember, did you guys ever see that, the video of the high school fitness testing during John F. Kennedy? Did you ever see that video, how fit those kids were? The standards of fitness in the 60s was incredible. I mean, you go look at a beach, a public beach at that time, no one was obese. No one was overweight. And what were we all eating? We were eating fat, saturated fat. No one was worrying about cholesterol. Actually, the standard of cholesterol back then was that if 300 was healthy. Why has everything changed? Because medicine and big pharma has become about a for-profit. And you follow that into the FDA, you follow that into the food production. It's all about money, right? Follow the money, you can follow everything. So ultimately, there's a lot of people right now awakening to the problem that we see everywhere. And they're saying, well, this is almost like carnivore is like a slap in the face. They're like, oh yeah, you tell me meat and egg is bad? Watch this, right? And so anyone that questions the system is considered a conspiracy theorist. Now, but carnivore has become a movement, and it's attracted many in the medical community and many great doctors. So the more you go down this rabbit hole, guys, the more you're going to find a lot of this information. This is why the X3 bar is so different. You got to imagine, I came in, free weights was my thing. I was an Olympic lifter. I was doing snatches, doing cleans, benching. My best deadlift was 435 for 5 reps, and I'm 175 pounds. So it's pretty strong for my weight, right? I hit 335, I think, on my best bench. My ego was like, I'm never going to touch bands. Are you serious? Right? What's this Kathy Ireland band stuff, right? Now, but then I read the science. I read Dr. John's book on weightlifting is a waste of time, and so is cardio. And I kind of already resonated with that because as a football player, I always knew sprints, power, right? 100-yard field, how fast, how strong, how powerful. As a defensive back, I played collegiate and semi-pro football. I ran a 4.40. So to me, I was always attracted to intensity. I thought cardio, I'm like, who wants to be running miles? Like, have you looked at a marathon runner? That does not look healthy, right? Let's be honest. Look at a sprinter. That looks attractive. You know what is attractive? Muscle. Biologically speaking, why do you think the warrior or the physique or the muscular man gets the woman? Because it's attractive. It's also survival of the fittest. So naturally, you have two things that are going to shorten your lifespan. One is low testosterone as a man. So make sure you address that. And Primo Medical can help you with that because nowadays there's healthy ways to do that matches your circadian rhythm. If you know anything about testosterone, it should be at its highest at the peak in the morning. When you wake up and have, as a man, you know what I mean. I'm not going to, in case any woman watches. So your actual testosterone should be at the peak in the morning and elevated throughout the day and kind of come to the end in the evening when you need to go to sleep. That testosterone has gone down exponentially since the 60s on the average man. And that has to do with our diet, our lifestyle, it has to do with, all the plastics, microwave. I mean, families now are microwaving everything. So you're just basically zapping your own natural production of testosterone. Now, your two levers to optimize health are testosterone and insulin. Now, insulin is controlled by your food choices. It's a lifestyle. Testosterone not always naturally controlled, even though you can do some things for that naturally. A lot of men find themselves having to go in a route of perhaps taking some therapy. But you can control insulin sensitivity by removing carbohydrates. Type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle decision that got you there that you can reverse. Type 3 diabetes, we're talking about, and people are discovering, again, lifestyle related to Alzheimer's, dementia, again, has to do with what you're putting in your body, including pharmaceuticals. You guys following me here? So when we talk about the lifestyle, you got to consider, what am I going to do to optimize as a man? And a woman, the same thing. It's just different hormones we're optimizing. How do I optimize my hormones? And how do I optimize my health through nutrition and fitness so that as I age into my 50s, into my 60s, 70s, 80s, I'm still strong and vibrant. Mental clarity is there. Energy is there. Libido is there. right? There should be no issues. I truly believe we're entering a time where you can live longer than ever with a great quality of life if you know what to do. And now it's just going to become better and better with medical interventions. Everything is moving now to sublingual nano technology, which means that you could put this in your mouth and it dissolves into your blood brain barrier instantly. And that's going to be a lot of what cutting edge modern technology will do. But with that, also, I truly believe things like peptide therapy could be massive change for people. All this is now at the forefront. And so you're in a good community of people when you kind of think about the leader on this ship, Dr. John Jaquish. Why? I mean, look at his lifestyle. He goes way back into the formation of the vibration plates out of his college years, but then through OsteoStrong, which is 5 times more effective than any drug created for the cure of osteoporosis, his own mother, he created that, and that has changed the world. And then he creates the X3 bar, and he's on the forefront of testosterone therapy because he actually himself was in a rugby accident in his youth that had to cause, what am I going to do to restore this naturally? Now you're looking at a carnivore who is a byproduct of all of how he lives. This is the key. Like how much do we see in this world right now? Hypocrisy everywhere. I always say, show me your fruit, in the sense of we should be surrounding ourselves around men and women and a medical community of people that live this lifestyle. And that's how we sharpen one another. And that's why we are here masterminding. Because if you want to be your best version of yourself, if you want to optimize your own gene expression, you got to put yourself through it, and you got to sharpen every single day. It's got to become one step in front of the other. Literally, do your 10,000 steps, right, Joe? You know what 10,000 steps is? It's 5 miles. That's impressive. I literally didn't know that. I was like, I'm gonna get 10,000 steps. I'm like, Siri, I was on my phone. I'm like, Siri, what is 10,000 steps? She's actually listening to me right now. It's funny. 5 miles. And so just getting out there and walking, Daniel in the X3 community is big on that. He's like, I mean, Daniel is like a league amongst of his own. Like, he's like, I always look at him. I'm like, you're like The Rock. Like, no, 99.9% of people are not going to do what you do. He also does things like fat cycling. So he's carnivore. He eats 1 meal a day, sometimes 2. He'll cycle between, some people will go that crazy route because they want to see how freaking jacked they can get. Right? Most of us just want to be healthy. So, lifestyle. You can do some of that type of stuff for a season. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do day in, day out for the rest of your life that's going to bring you joy? At this moment, in my mind, I can walk. I can lead the family that way. Because if my kids are getting outside and walking with us, I can do the X3 bar. Not to mention, my kids are 10, 8, 5. I want to be able to be super dad for them and, be the example of health. So, because they're entering a time where they're becoming in love with sports. So I remember those days, right? Football, baseball, basketball, soccer, all of it. So, I mean, you don't want to be that parent that's on the sideline or that grandparent that's on the sideline, right? You want to be able to be active for as long as possible. I've seen some cool videos out there of like 80, 90-year-olds sprinting. So yeah, guys, I'm just here to kind of encourage you and inspire you and motivate you to be the best version of yourself, to create a lifestyle, to consider that you've never had so much information at your disposal. It's what you do with it. And then ultimately put together a plan, set goals. It has to be lifestyle habits. Think about, there's great books on this. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. What that kind of means is usually there's a keystone habit. Let's just say, for example, if you prioritize waking up at a certain time in the morning, that means you're going to prioritize going to sleep at a certain time if you're going to get adequate sleep. So you're preparing for your day that you want success in the night before. It could be laying out the gym clothes, that could be meal prep, that could be whatever you got to do, right? But if you wake up at a certain time, for example, then maybe that first thing you do is walk outside. Maybe that first thing you do, it's a spiritual practice. It's a meditation. It could be some personal development. However you start your day, that then becomes the next habit. So you know if you wake up at a certain time and do a certain activity or habit is going to produce the compound effect of the next habit and the next habit and the next habit. So you got to figure out what that is for you. For me, if I wake up at a certain time, I know that I'm going to get into my spiritual practice, which means I'm reading, I'm enriching my heart and soul. And from there, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to have this, for me, this beautiful cup of coffee kind of motivates and gets my day going. And as I'm writing, as I'm reading, I then am planning for my day, and I use something called the Full Focus Planner by Darren, or excuse me, Full Focus Planner, I believe is Michael, can't remember his last name. It'll come to me. But it's a great planner, and you can set annual goals, and you can set smarter goals and habit goals. And ultimately, as I'm writing all this, I'm dreaming and I'm visualizing, I'm thinking about my day, and I'm looking at all the appointments ahead and all these things I want to accomplish. And generally, sometimes I even have my big three that I want to accomplish. Then I get to kind of think about, okay, where's that workout going to come in? Where's that X3 bar? And for a long time, it was right after that activity. Right now, I'm segmenting in my days to accommodate my wife. So we're doing it at my lunch hour. So it gives me more time to do things that I want to do in the morning, to be there as a dad, to prepare the kids' lunches for their school or make them breakfast, et cetera, et cetera. So before I start my day, and even when I start my day right here, typically at 8 a.m., and I'm in my team meeting, there's so much I did in my workday ritual to start to get there that I was already planning on for how I wanted that day to look like. Right? So if you plan and prepare ahead of time, you're going to get results. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to succeed. So what you need to do, if you're thinking about it this year, Joe, Gary, and everybody else, Joel, Travis, Sheldon, is to write it down and then write down your next steps. So you might have a goal, but what are you going to do on the daily to get to that goal, to achieve that goal? And do you need to create a habit tracker? Because there certain habits that you have to accomplish inside of that day to make that happen, then you need to make sure you do it. Right? So my suggestion to you is create a lifestyle so that it means don't write anything or do anything that you know you're setting yourself up for failure. Meaning you know yourself. Ultimately, create a goal that you know you can achieve. And so I've done carnivore diet as a lifestyle for a long time. So removing some dairy is not a big issue for me. It's something I can achieve. Will I miss it? Of course, it's delicious. But I'm now just doing meat, eggs, seafood, a little bit of poultry and pork here and there, and butter, and kind of doing what I've always done. The only thing I'm really adding is a workout with my wife, and we're documenting the journey on social media so that it becomes fun for people to engage with and see that you too can do this with your significant other, right? Like I see so many people posting their workouts and things, but I'm like, where's the family doing? Why is the family not involved? Why don't we create this big push in the States is to make America healthy again? Doesn't that mean all of us as a family? And what does that look like? In our marriage, what does that look like in our household, right? Because if we're making changes, we need to all make changes together. So I'm just trying to show you that that's possible. Because as men, we're the leaders, we're the foundation, we're the rock, right? And so we lead the house. And if we can ultimately get everybody on board, I think that's the greatest example that you can give to the world. All right.
I
Go
have
ahead.
what do you use for cooking non-seed oils? What's your
Butter. Butter's my go-to. Yeah, butter, tallow, lard. You know, save the drippings from your tallow, save the drippings from your bacon. Recook with it. It's delicious. Seriously,
okay?
especially your eggs, throwing them back in, like, or your beef. I'm like I call myself the lazy carnivore. I find the easiest way to cook everything. You know, one of my goals for the future would become like when I look at the shows on Netflix about like these guys that smoke and spend days, you know, making like the beautiful brisket and the ribs. I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing. I just don't have the time for it, but I want to make that one of these days because I'm passionate about meat, obviously. One of these days, I want to actually spend the time to learn how to become a master barbecue guy. But for now, throwing something on the Ninja Grill or the air fryer out of convenience is like so easy. Or just frying it on a pan, right? So sometimes it just depends on where you're at in your life. But if you have more time, you might spend a little bit more time figuring out how to prepare that food and, you know, becomes a passion of yours.
I use a pellet grill, so for me that's kind of like your Ninja, just as a digital thermometer.
Nice.
Fill it up with pellets, throw meat on there, and forget about it, and come back and pull it out later.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, whatever you're gonna do and do continually. For me, it's I've got this like Ninja smoker that I was on this RV trip with my wife and we were watching this in our RV, this info commercial. You know, they still have those out there. And you know, you throw these little pellets in there to smoke the meat. But I just find I have all these options: dehydrating, grill, bake, roast, air fryer, and majority of the time I just throw it on the grill setting and press start. It heats up. I throw whatever meat on there. 5 minutes later, I come and flip it, open the lid, it's done. Right? I mean, it's like, okay, that's pretty easy. So, you know, when you got 4 kids and you're just trying to make life easy, you're kind of all sometimes, and I rotate between like chicken wings, then I make myself chicken thighs. So, I mean, in our house, feeding kids, try to get whatever I can get them to eat, right? Um, Bacon and eggs. My kids love cheesy eggs, so I do that for them. Obviously, like in a perfect world, I'm eating ribeyes all the time, but it's not like that. When I can eat them. But other times, like a lot of ground beef, you know, simple eggs, lots of eggs and bacon. Costco, I'll occasionally get like a can of sardine here and there. I like it with olive oil if I do it. Some oysters, um, smoked salmon is something I do from time to time. And actually, I found this grass-fed corned beef that comes in a can from Costco. That's actually quite delicious, surprisingly. When I'm lazy, I just want to grab something really quick. So you kind of guys think of the staple foods that you keep in your house. I think ruminant meat and eggs is like the go-tos. And then outside of that, add in the poultry, the pork, a little bit of seafood, like depending on how you feel, test it. I personally, I'm a salt, pepper, garlic type of guy, but some people just try to remove it for a little bit and then add it back in, see how you feel. And then, of course, dairy is a little bit more controversial. So, you know, if you're stalling on weight, remove dairy. That's my recommendation. But if you're at optimal health and you feel like everything is kind of in, try some raw dairy, see how you feel. Just be cognizant of dairy seems to be one of those slippery slopes that can go either way with people. It's delicious. So it's hard to have like just a piece and or you know what I mean, in terms of like it just becomes almost like a you're like, oh, I'm just gonna eat it all type of thing. And then before you know it, you're like, well, why is my weight not where I want it to be? So that's the one thing I would say. I mean, I would argue, say, Dr. John and I had a conversation. I'm like, well, dairy is really meant for infancy and child growth. If you think about it, got like insulin production type of results with it. When you're trying to get bigger and grow mass, it could be beneficial. So it's one of those things you got to test for yourself. It is essentially a carnivore-based, animal-based food, but is it optimal for you to get to where your energy, your inflammation, your optimal body weight and leanness? Probably not. But it's still enjoyable. So you got to just mess around with it. All right, last minute thoughts, questions. Hopefully we got motivated today. We're all ready to crush it for 2025, right? Cool. Well, thanks, guys. I mean, if there's any topics that you want to focus on heading into next week, we do these just to be there for the community. And so I could bring on guests if there's certain people that you want me to bring on. Any topics that you want to focus on, please just don't hesitate. Reach out to me, send me a DM on Facebook, and we'll make that a priority.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a great day. Happy New Year, everybody. And we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.